Hi, everybody. This is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural. How you all doing today? And today I have a gentleman by the name of Ed Becker. And Ed, he's an author. He's authored 2 books which have to do with the true and malevolent haunting that him and his family experienced many years ago. Back in 1970 is when it started. And of course, and for all of those people that were not around then, this was prior to, of course, any of the horror movies that came out afterwards, like The Exorcist and The Omen, and of course, lately, all these reality shows. This was way back then. Just to give you a little bit of context about what, where he was at and where his family was at, where they experienced it. And Ed is, he's originally from Chicago, and I believe he's been married many, many years to his wife, Marcia. He has 2 daughters. He has grandchildren now. And besides the fact that it's true, one of the things that I think is so unique is that even after so many years, which I'm very glad he wrote these books, it's almost like a way for a person to see, that those events that transpired, they're not, what the ramifications are for family. And the reason why I say this is that nowadays it's become like the in thing to either experience a haunting or have a ghost or the worst, a possession. And I think that's fantasy land, personally, based on my own experience, being involved in this field since the 1990s. And I know that when Ed goes into the description of what he and his family experienced, you will see that is very, very, very far from the reality of finding yourself right in the middle of this situation. So, hi Ed, how are you doing today? If you could take us back briefly, how you happened to, we talked about it right before we were recording, that you were a young family, you had a baby, and what you were looking for was, I need a place to live. I need a place for my family to live. So this is what led you to purchases. So take it away. What happened?
It was it was an easy purchase, actually, because we didn't have any options. In those years, a landlord could tell you that, no, I don't want any children. Mm-hmm. I don't want any pets. They could advertise working couple only. As there are options, and we couldn't find an apartment. So what I found was a building that was an air estate. Oh, that's your dog, I hope.
Yes, that is my dog. Don't worry about him. He's like out of arm's reach. I have 4 little dogs, Ed. So my audience knows that I have that every once in a while you're going to get some weird noise in the background, and I have also birds, so you can't control animals. What can I say? So anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
All right. It was advertised as an air estate. Described that way, I knew that someone had probably died there.
Okay.
But that doesn't raise any eyebrows, because in a city like Chicago or New York or Baltimore, mm-hmm. We have 100-year-old buildings.
Sure.
What kind of building do you think no one's ever died in?
Exactly.
But ghosts weren't a topic in those years. If you look back at 1970 and look at the ghosts they had, we had a romantic ghost, the ghost in Mrs. Muir.
Right.
We had a cartoon ghost, Casper. Mm-hmm. We had a funny ghost, Topper in the movies.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, it was very, I want to say innocent is the good word for it, the versions that were out there.
Yeah, and I was a young man, and didn't have much fear of ghosts, mm-hmm. But dealing with ghosts is kind of like shadow boxing. You can box and hit the air and no one's punching back. When you're dealing with a spirit, you quickly learn that you can't see them, you can't control them, you can't predict what they're going to do next.
Right.
And you can't hurt them. You can't you just can't scare them. I mean, I tried screaming them out. I tried swearing at them. And I think my book has hit home with a lot of people. I mean, I've sold tens of thousands of copies.
Yes.
All over the world. Because in my book, I don't try to scare anybody. Originally, it was written as my diary. Mm-hmm. And then it was my family, my youngest daughter, actually, that talked me into publishing it.
I'm glad she did.
And after I published it, I started getting, I've got literally thousands.
Ed, you know what? How long, because, and you tell me, because, you know, a lot of times nowadays, especially reality TV, the way they portray it is that people go, especially when it involves any type of haunting, you know, that it goes from 0 to 60 in 3 days. And from people that I've interviewed, in my own experience, it doesn't quite happen that quick. Sometimes it builds up little by little, and then the incidents start becoming either more sinister or more apparent. Is that what happened in your case?
Yeah, definitely. And I think references are without any rules. Like today, you know, you have all kinds of rules, and you got places to go where you got so-called experts that'll tell you how to behave. I didn't know how to behave, and as a young man, I was. I think I was like any other man in that, or head of a household,
right?
Where there is no such thing as a man or a head of a household declaring or admitting that he cannot control his domain.
I know it's going to be pretty hard,
and that's exactly what happened. You know, eventually to me, is that at first, you know, my wife was more sensitive, and she could tell we were having a problem right away. I chose to first ignore it and then rationalize it, and I went through all these changes. Then when I finally admitted it, and I couldn't deny it any longer,
right?
I became angry. I thought I could just kick it out, yell it out. You know, it was my domain, and hell, if these people were going to control it, or these spirits. And I acted in a poor manner. You know, today I know that you don't organize them. I probably made them more active than they were, simply because I did so many things that were disrespectful, as far as throwing their stuff out and yelling at them and, you know, doing all these things. I didn't behave properly. Today I know that, you know, if and their spirits, I mean, people don't realize that there's spirits everywhere. Ghosts are plentiful.
Yes, they are.
And if one crosses my path now, I meet it with compassion and with prayer.
Exactly.
And you know, a lot of people read my book, and they sent me thousands of emails, literally, from all over the world. And I think one of the things that everybody liked about it was that I didn't try to scare anybody. I don't think you'll find the words terrified or horrific or anything like that in the book. It's a real case of what spirits can do and how they react and how you react emotionally.
Yes, and there's nothing scarier than the truth.
Yeah, and in the end, they wore me down. They got me to where I was agitated, I was anxious, I was sleep deprived.
Well, that's bad. That's a bad combination.
You know, I was always looking over my shoulder. It was a terrible experience, probably the worst experience of my whole life, for sure. And I was glad to get out of there.
Ed, let me ask you something. And it's like you said, you know, your wife right away knew something was going on. And by the time after you had gone through all like you described these various steps of denial, anger, whatever, was there one event which was the one that you said, I need to get help? Or was it just like you said, hey, I've reached the end of my rope? Like you said, no sleep, anxious. How did it happen that you said, I can't handle this on my own?
Well, really, it was it was a series of events. I mean, first it started with the telephone coming off the hook all the time, and then it was dishes moving and a mixer coming off the wall, and then it became the blinking lights in the kitchen, and then it became a door that was able to that I could vibrate almost at will. I tried to close it, and the spirit kept wanting to open it.
Wow.
It was a plug that came out of the bathtub where I couldn't take a bath. We had no shower, and I had to drain plug, a metal one. And it was after a whole series of events. We were sitting at dinner, and my wife started talking about our problem, and I just dismissed it, and she got angry.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, how can you dismiss it when you've done all these things to counter the activity? So you must have realized that there is activity. And she was right. And at that moment, I sort of relaxed and said, yeah, you're right, this place is haunted. The problem became, what do you do about it? Because in those years, there was no... there were no ghost investigators or psychics, and
right.
Our church, frankly, disowned us.
Really? I've heard that story more than once.
Yeah, and, I understand why. I mean, it's probably still like that today all over the country. Mm-hmm. Because there's nothing in the Bible that talks about ghosts. And a true exorcist is rare.
Right, I know. I know that nowadays a lot of people think it's common, but at the same time, you're always hoping, especially from your church, and I'm not saying this about Catholic, I'm saying about any type of religion, a little bit of compassion, whether it's true paranormal or whether it's just a family in crisis. You're hoping that somebody's going to say, okay, let me visit you, listen to you at the very least. But it sounds that didn't happen with you guys.
No, it didn't happen at all, and it was just total denial. And with the Catholic religion in Chicago, you have what's called parishes.
Yes.
And if you belong to a parish, you can't go to another parish.
Right, yeah.
So once I was refused by our parish, I couldn't go to another parish because I was a member of that parish. So it sort of took out all of our options, and we were very, very lucky. I have a psychic called Jody Louise.
Okay.
There's a book out on him. There's a book out on him right now called Psychic Courier. He had prominence at the time. He was involved with finding the Manson people and predicting a certain destruction of a bridge.
Wow.
So he was the Sylvia Browne or the John Edwards of his day.
Okay.
He just happened to live in Chicago.
Good.
And my wife contacted his office, and of course they didn't want to be fooled. He had a reputation to protect.
Sure.
So they sent out an investigator. We had, fill out actually an application. Mm-hmm. They had to investigate the house. And when they came to the conclusion that, it's a valid problem and we have high activity, then Jody Louise agreed to come in and help us. When he came into the house, on the first floor, he found a room that he whatever was in there, that he didn't want to mess with it as a medium.
Oh, wow.
So he decided he was going to bring in an exorcist.
This was after just one visit?
So he did bring in an exorcist.
Wow. Okay.
I'm sorry?
Okay, so he knew that whatever was there was just not a regular haunting, in other words.
It was beyond. As a medium, he opens up his mind and actually sometimes lets the spirit take possession of him.
Okay.
To communicate. But he knew whatever was existing in that area would allow it to take possession of him. Now, the both of them, God bless them both, because they helped me out a great deal as a young man. Psychic do not work together.
Let me ask something, Ed. When he went in there, when he went in there, and he was, like you're saying, he's doing basically a walk. Did he ever tell you what it was about that? I mean, I can imagine it's got to be kind of shocking to somebody that you have somebody in there basically doing a walkthrough, and he comes back to you and he's telling you, guess what? I think we need an exorcist. That must have been a shocker.
Yeah, the whole thing was kind of, it was an education for me, because they talked about these things that I did not know what an exorcist was.
Mm-hmm.
So he said he's going to bring in an exorcist. It was like, what's he talking about, exorcising? I didn't know what he brought in an exorcist, and we wound up having, NBC wound up finding out about it, because a Father Joe Woods, he became familiar with the case.
Okay.
He actually wanted in, but he couldn't get permission.
Okay.
So he recommended an Anglican, William Darrell Davis.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow in there, NBC became aware of it. And Carol Simpson called me, and she said, can we film it? Can we film your house? And at first I said no. I did not want any exposure. But one of the investigators' name was Tom Valentine, who's also an author.
Okay.
And he's a real good author. But he approached me and said, Joe's just got a new book out. Can you do this for Joe? And, well, since they spent days at my house, never asking me for a dime.
Okay.
I couldn't refuse. I said, okay. So I opened the door for NBC.
Okay.
And that's the footage that you see on YouTube of our exorcism.
Yes.
The footage that was actually lost was a 20-minute segment that they ran on a program that they had at the time called First Tuesday, which was Arrival of 60 Minutes. So they ran a 20-minute segment of us on that, but it didn't play in the Chicagoland area because there were some kind of FCC rules.
Right.
In those years where you can only spend so much time. Well, they had played video, I don't know, 50 times. It was playing morning, noon, and night in the news. People kept requesting it more and more and more and more. And I actually believe that it became a sign and something that the movie entertainment industry realized that was possible, that people were very interested in the paranormal.
Okay.
And, because it was sometime after that all of a sudden, out comes The Exorcist, out comes Amityville.
Right, yeah. That was right after. That was in the early 70s.
Yeah, and, neither of those two stories are true, but the public had an appetite for that type of thing.
Oh, yeah.
And that's when, all of a sudden you have horrific images and things like that. I didn't have those images, fortunately, in my youth when we had the building because, if you read my book, you'll read that I messed with these spirits quite a bit. But I did so because, it's like I tell paranormal investigators to beware because you have a false bravado. It's easy to approach something and to deal with something that you can't see.
Yeah, because you have no point of reference as to...
Yeah, you might not be so brave if you saw what you're really dealing with.
Exactly.
And, I get some criticism at times because all I can do is warn people and be... tell them to beware because you don't want to invite these things into your life. And, when they tell me that they go into haunted houses and they're protected, okay, because they do this protection ritual, whatever it is.
Right.
I tell them that's baloney. It's baloney because I'm a very devout person when it comes to Jesus Christ and God. I can ask for all the protection in the world, but if I walk into a tiger's cage and pull his tail,
it's the end of
God's
that.
just going to look down at me like I'm some kind of... Yeah, he's going to say, I guess I built that guy in a flawed way. He's not going to protect you if you're out looking for trouble.
Let me ask you something, Ed.
And that's what.
There was a part that I saw that you had a conversation with your next door neighbor, and you kind of got a little bit of insight as to who had lived there before. How long had you been living in the house when you had that conversation with him?
It was pretty soon after, actually.
Okay.
And, I didn't put a lot of the conversation in the book because it was pretty frightening. It was something I withheld from my wife. I didn't tell her everything that he told me because she was already frightened, sensing something. She was already frightened. I was not going to add to her fears.
I imagine.
But it was soon after. I mean, we hit it off right away. He was just a wonderful old guy. And he had his bottle of Southern Comfort hidden in a wood pile next to his furnace in his basement. And we'd go down there, and we'd be doing shots at 10 in the morning, 9 in the morning. And
he was like...
And I enjoyed knowing him, but he basically gave me a very dark past on the family and on the house.
At that point, did you suspect the connection, or was it later that you're thinking, okay, knowing what I know about who lived here, and because part of what he described was that there was more than maybe one member of that family who suffered from mental illness, that you started realizing that the quality of what you were experiencing.
You never get it. Nobody I know has ever been introduced to their ghost. So and spirits lie.
Oh yes, they do.
Lie. It's like these people that play with Ouija boards.
Mm-hmm.
They play with the Ouija board, and if they're lucky enough, I mean, hundreds of thousands of Ouija boards are sold every year as toys.
Yes.
Not all of them can work, okay? But if you go through, if you're able to make that, crack that barrier, you're going to ask for your Uncle George, and you're going to ask, is my Uncle George there? And the board's going to answer yes. Okay? Then you're going to ask them some questions, and everything's going to be positive. The reason is because whoever's on the other side is the strongest spirit in at that time in that place.
Sure.
So, I mean, I use the analogy that if I were in a prison and I stood on the wall of the prison, threw a cell phone out in the yard and said, whoever gets it can use it, the biggest, baddest guy in the yard is going to get to use it.
Absolutely. And that's a very good example of how to think about that.
And they're never going to say anything negative. They're never going to say anything like, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to haunt you, I'm going to... It's always going to be positive, because what they want to do, they want to addict you.
Yes, they do.
Which most people fall for. The Ouija board becomes... I know a number of people where the Ouija board is an addiction.
Yes. Yes. There's nothing as enticing as the power of divination.
The spirit will do that. Well, the family that lived there, I mean, one of the things that I found early on was that I found a well-worn Ouija board.
Oh.
And at the time, it was meaningless to me. So I broke it up and threw it away. It wasn't, it wasn't until retrospect, years later, that I realized the significance of finding a well-worn Ouija board.
Wow.
And it always made me wonder, did the family that lived there conjure something up, things into the house?
It's more than likely, yeah.
So, but you can't tell because you can't see them, and they never introduce themselves. I mean, the one apparition that my wife and I saw clearly did fit the description of the mother of who had was one of the ones that built the house, the wife.
Let me ask, because they were the original owners or occupants of that house, right? They built that house.
Yeah, we were the first ones ever to live in there that were not a blood relative.
Interesting. And when so here you go, you finally get some type of help. He brings in, the psychic tells you, okay, we're going to get a little bit of extra help, and introduces you into the world of exorcism. And then what happened after that, Ed? And then, of course, like you said, NBC decides they're going to televise this. What was the effect afterwards? Because I've heard some people that it sometimes makes things worse.
I don't know what made it worse. If it was me, or it's much like when we had the house blessed.
Okay.
It definitely antagonized whatever was there.
Really?
Our house blessing did not go well. I mean, the priest, and he basically didn't finish the blessing, ran for the hills.
Whoa.
They did antagonize them, but there was a lot of negative feelings between the psychic and the exorcist.
Really?
Because they have different philosophies. One wants to go into a trance and allow his mind to be used. Mm-hmm. And sometimes his body to be used by a spirit.
Right.
An exorcist wouldn't hear of doing anything like that.
Yeah, I could see where that would
William Darrell Davis knew was that he was called in as an exorcist, but he had nobody to exorcise. And he was going to sit next to this medium who was going to allow things to take over his mind, which, is unacceptable to an exorcist.
Okay.
So
right.
they had this natural friction.
I can imagine.
That I knew that they weren't getting along well. I didn't know why. I didn't know what, I didn't know the purpose of an exorcist. I didn't actually know what a medium does. Mm-hmm. Today I know exactly why they didn't get along.
Right, but back then you were like...
exactly polar opposites. So, you'll never hear of an exorcist and a psychic working together. That's
no.
Maybe in the movies or something, but not in real life.
No, I can imagine. And because...
But they failed.
I was going to say that probably didn't help any that they weren't on the same page.
No, they failed. And you could tell, I mean, if you look at the YouTube video, it's short. It's only about 6 or 7 minutes. But the actual ritual took 3.5 hours. And when you see the very end of the YouTube video and you look at their faces, you can tell that they're not happy. They weren't successful. And William Darrell Davis kind of moved away and didn't contact us that much, but Jody Louise stayed with us.
Okay.
And contacted us almost daily. And, he was obsessed with me changing my behavior because I was addressing these spirits and swearing at them and doing things I shouldn't do. Mm-hmm. But he was also, him and I became friends. I did a radio program with him. And, we kept in touch, distantly in touch, till he died in 2008.
And it sounds almost, Ed, the truth is that even though, the immediate thought that everybody would think that maybe it was that family that were the original owners might have been producing the phenomena, there sounds like because somebody looked like was heavily engaging in spirit communication, there could have been a whole host of beings there. And I'm going to say beings because, like you said, whoever it was, whether they knew what they were doing or because they attempted it so many times, maybe opened up some type of doorway. And like you said, unusually what steps through is very dark and negative. So for all we know, they were maybe, if they were there in spirit, were maybe being held hostage by whatever this entity was, which was what that psychic first felt when he came to visit and said, we need extra help. I mean, it sounds like there was, in other words, more than just one layer of paranormal events or supernatural agency that was working there and producing all this phenomena.
I'm not sure, and I've had communications and advice from all over the world. One medium contacted me, and she felt that it was the original landowners
Okay.
that owned all the land around there.
Oh, really?
That was that made some sense to me only because right down the street was a house that almost looked identical to ours.
Okay.
The type of architecture our house was common in Chicago.
Okay.
And a woman contacted me from Miami, and she said she lived on the same block, about 6 houses down. And she said they had high activity in their house.
Really?
And they had to go. When this medium contacted me and said she thought the landowner, it kind of made sense to me. But then again, what else also made sense to me is that when you have houses that are 100 years old, and you go back to the 1900s and 1910, whatever, wakes and funerals in the front room parlors.
Yeah, people were born and people died in their houses.
Yeah, and it's like I tell people, show me a place that isn't haunted, that's 100 and some years old.
Yes.
In some of these major cities, everywhere. The thing you don't want to do, actually, is a lot of times people will write me and they'll say, how do I get involved in the paranormal? And my answer is always the same. I tell them, do not open, because once you become aware of those things, you see things, hear things, and you're aware of things that you were never aware of before.
Yes, that is true.
And, it's not fun. And, at my age now, with my experience, I'm a big fraidy cat. I won't go anywhere that's knowingly haunted. The odds of me trying to use a ghost box are zero. I don't want to talk to spirits. I don't want to see spirits.
And you don't want them to talk to you.
Yeah, because and you run into spirits. I mean, we've had spirits pass through our house. Mm-hmm. I call them travelers.
Yes.
And we've had travelers, and I just don't address them. I don't interfere with whatever activity they do, and I don't want any part of the paranormal, actually.
Well, you know what? You make a very good point, Ed. Not everybody realizes that ghosts or spirits, however you want to use the term, are not bound to certain places. Everybody thinks that you have to go to a haunted location, and you do have spirits that are not bound to a location, and what you call your travelers. And
it's a question that I always have, and sometimes I upset the investigators. A couple times I've done radio programs where investigators were on there. I think the investigators are all like playing games and doing the wrong thing. They're immature. If you can get an EVP, or all investigators follow the same criteria of asking questions, you'd be able to get some statistics as far as what is on the other side.
Right.
Is it cold? Do they have time? Is it light? Is it dark? Spirit bound to the location? Why can a spirit become audible, or a shadow, or an apparition? You can ask, people who get active EVPs,
right,
questions that are meaningful. And, quite frankly, it's been 45 years, and no one knows any more about the paranormal than I did 45 years ago.
No,
I mean, when I hear some people talk,
popular,
I know everything they learned. Everything they learned from the paranormal came off the program Supernatural. That's their education.
Oh, my God.
They talk about portals and things like that.
Right.
And I was on a radio program with a woman who said she had a portal in her bathroom, and all kinds of stuff was coming through there, okay? And so I told her, I said, you know where the portal is? She said, yes. And I said, you know exactly where it is? She said, yes. And I said, do me a favor. She said, what? In there. Well, everybody started laughing. It was a round table, and everybody was laughing. I wasn't being funny, because I'd want to see what's on the other side. We don't know, and no one can tell us. And all we know is what what's been written by Stephen King or Wes Craven or whatever, which is just all a bunch of fantasy.
Well, it makes you think, though, Ed, that whatever's on that other side of wherever it is, it's not a good place to be. You understand? Because otherwise, they wouldn't try to either cross over or interact with the living. It's almost like, without knowing precisely what it is or where, I'm not even going to say where because we're talking spatially there. It's like whatever it is, it can't be a good place because nobody wants to stay there. Everybody wants out. Or at least that's what it sounds like. And when you have... I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't answer. I'm not an expert. I know what I've experienced. And I know that the argument that these things weren't people, they were people. They're spirits that were definitely people.
Okay.
Spirits that were not people. I don't know what the source of that is. Whether that's voodoo or hoodoo or negative energy. But I do know a little about ghosts, and I do know it's much like I get people that'll write me ghosts that opens my closet door. I go to sleep at night, I close the closet door, and my clothes are ruffled. Well, the first thing I ask them is, are you afraid? Does it scare you? If they say no, which most times they do, they'll say, no, it doesn't scare me. It's just a curious thing. I tell them, don't mess with it. Don't try to lock that door. Don't try to put a clip on it. Is going to cause that spirit to do something different. It's going to, it has to do another action. And that was the mistake I made when I owned this haunted house. The lights flickered, so I put in a new light fixture. That just caused it to pull the plug out of my bathtub, and I had to put in a new plug.
Right.
That caused the mixer to come off the wall. It's going to always have an action that it does. And all you're going to do by trying to eliminate it is to alter whatever the action is.
Let me ask you, Ed, because it sounds like what you and your family endured did you, and I'm going to use a now term, and maybe... Did you and your family, after you moved out of there, did you have what we would call like PTSD in the sense of, I'm not talking clinically, but where once you had left, you were afraid that, that this was going to happen again?
I wasn't. My wife was. She was worried about them following us. And I wasn't. I was free as a bird. It was like, I put it in the rearview mirror. It was over.
See ya.
And the only thing I did do in those years was because of Jody Louise, the psychic, I started to rub elbows and to meet other people who were gifted. So I made a friend of a telekinetic who actually wound up working for the government. I met other psychics, and I wanted to understand the powers of the human mind.
Okay.
And I do admit, and I realize there's a lot of gifted people out there, and not like on Facebook, where everybody's a reader and all that.
No, I know.
That's all baloney. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all a bunch of baloney. A true gifted person is going to they're going to hide. They're not going to be out there in plain view.
Yeah, it could be because you get overwhelmed.
Sometimes their gift is painful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have one that messages me for whatever reason. I have a link with her, and she'll send me things, amazing things. She'll seem like she knows what's going on in my life. But if I say her name, no one's ever heard her name, and no, she doesn't post on Facebook. She does not give readings. She's a very private person. But for some reason, we established a link. Just honor it and go with it, Well,
you know what, Ed? The truth is that people that, whether they're a psychic, a medium, or both psychic mediums, it's draining. It's a draining experience when you do that work. Contrary to what people think, it taxes your mind, your body, and your spirit. That's why you're absolutely correct when you say that, the real, the true, the authentic, genuine ones usually keep a very low profile, because at some point in time they understand how it impacts you, at the very least on a physical level. If you are going to have all these people that want, whether it's tell my fortune, talk to my dead, whoever, whatever, find my lost dog, they know what's absolutely the downside of something like that. So you're absolutely right when you say that they keep a very low profile, for good reason.
Yeah, I respect the gifted people, and I understand that, I got to know Jody Louise very well, and I understand the pain. Okay, if you have a clear vision, and you know that there's this building or this bridge is going to collapse,
mm-hmm.
but you don't get the message as to where or when.
Exactly.
Disburdened.
Yes, it is.
That there's going to be this horrible happening, and you can't do a damn thing about it. The pain that they live with many times. So I understand that, and I respect them for that, and I wouldn't want to be gifted myself.
All right, yeah, what they call the Cassandra effect. That sometimes what you're
it's more
privy
like
to
curse.
is horrible occurrences. And then, and of course that opens up a whole different discussion about predestination and things that are going to happen no matter what. And you're just like given like an opportunity to look at it. But like you said, as a human being, if, unless you're a psychopath and you have a conscience, you would wish that you could do something about it to stop it or warn them. But it's like, no. So yeah, you're absolutely right that something like that, it's like a gift you absolutely don't want, because it's not a gift, I guess. So,
yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I sometimes go on a radio channel in the UK, and they call me the paranormal guy because I don't promote the paranormal. My book True Haunting actually was sent to the printer with my daughter's name on it.
Oh,
so it should have been True Haunting by Catherine Higdon, and as told to Catherine Higdon from Ed Becker. My daughter changed it back.
Oh.
And then it became an instant hit. I mean, it was number one in new releases, and it shot to the top of Amazon.
Yes.
And next thing I know, Paranormal Witness came after me. And again, I said, no, I don't want any part of it. Paranormal Witness. And I made it very difficult for them to deal with me, because they were filming in Boston, and I said, no, I'm not going to Boston. And I fixed it so I wasn't going to do this program. But my granddaughters are all, see, I don't have cable TV. My granddaughters were all sci-fi people, sci-fi channels. So they knew about it. And they threatened to disown me.
You were outnumbered,
if I didn't do the program. So, yeah, I did Paranormal Witness, and we did that. And I've had some unusual things happen. I mean, when you write a book and it's a true story,
right?
A lot of times an author fears that someone's going to stand up and say that didn't happen. Okay, I had the exact opposite.
I can imagine.
I wound up finally connecting with one of my tenants.
Okay.
He told me it was so horrific, I had to put it in the second book, True Haunting 2.
Okay.
It was just a revelation to me, everything that happened to him.
Wow.
So, you can't, I couldn't get a better endorsement than that,
No, what I'm saying is when you and your wife were at the point that you guys were going to leave, that you said, we're leaving, we're out of here, whatever. Like you said, prior to that, maybe when you were talking about it or discussing it, did things ramp up? Did things get worse there?
No, a couple things happened during that period that were different.
Okay.
Because they always seem to come up with something different, and that's part of what creates. If you live in that type of environment, it creates anxiety and tension and loss of sleep. We were only able to live there actually less than 2 years. When I've read other authors' books where they say they lived in a haunted house for 10 years. It's impossible. If it's truly haunted, you can't endure that for 10 years. You'd go crazy. I would have lost my mind because you don't sleep well. You're sleep deprived. You're always looking over your shoulder. You're blaming each other for everything. I mean, if my wallet was out of place, I'd right away, blame my wife, and my wife would say no, and we'd start arguing. And that's what these spirits love to do, is to create emotional energy that they can feed off of.
Yes, they do.
So, I was very lucky in that I was kind of a purist when I wrote the book, because I wasn't I wasn't affected by anything in the media. I wrote exactly what happened.
Right.
And, and a lot of times there have been people that said, well, it's not scary enough. And they're right. It lacks the boo factor.
Mm-hmm.
The truth of the matter is that if a ghost was to come out and scare you, if you could buy yourself a haunted house, you walk in, and all of a sudden this apparition appears, and it looks like the devil, and it's threatening and screaming at you, you'd run the hell out of there.
Of course.
All right? There'd be nobody who would ever live in a haunted house like that. And that's not what ghosts do. They work on your energy, and they gradually weave their way into your life.
Yes, they do.
And they drain the hell out of you.
Yes, they do. That's exactly how they work.
If people read my book and they get that out of it, I'm happy,
And I think that's where a lot of people nowadays, they make that mistake, like I said, thinking that when you find yourself in that type of situation, whether by mistake or by choice, that it's like 2 days after moving in, everything goes sideways for you. And I found in true experiences that it's quite the contrary. It's very insidious, and I'm going to use that word, and I know it's a title of a movie, but it is. It starts out with things that either you chalk off to your imagination, or like you said, to the other person or persons in the house. When you said, hey, I changed out the flickering light bulb because all I'm thinking is I've got a faulty light bulb or electrical, you go through all these things, and it's like slowly it starts pervading your reality, but it makes you start questioning your eyes, your ears, and then that takes days and weeks and months before you're like get to the point like what you said, where you realize, okay, how can I dismiss this? How can I, I've gone through all the rational explanations to account for this.
It took me to despair.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, at one point, my wife left and went home to her mother, and she couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah.
And I just felt like I was just, down as low as you can be, as much of a failure as you can feel like.
Let me ask you, how was it? I know she was alone at home during the daytime, right? Was she at home and you were at work, and she stayed home, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. And I know that for her must have been nerve-wracking. Because
well, that's a primary topic in my second book, because a lot of readers out to me that I never gave them a true perspective of what my wife had gone through, and they were 100% correct. I didn't come home from work and say, "How was your day?" I already knew how her day was, and I didn't want to hear it. Because as a young man who felt like he'd control the world, exactly. I knew I couldn't control whatever hell was in that house. I didn't want to add to my wife's problems. Ignored it. It sort of went unspoken. So in my second book, here I am 43 years later doing a detailed interview with my wife as far as what her day was like.
Wow.
You know, I never knew that she taught our nephews how to read and write. Forgot the part where I got so angry I smashed one of my guitars. She had all these memories and happenings that were incredible. Plus, my first floor tenant, dog that ran away, just like ours did.
Incredible.
They had sounds and touching and all kinds of things. It sounded like the first floor was more active than our second floor. So that's what the second book is. It's everything I left out of the first book.
Right. Like almost like the other perspective. You mentioned that your wife, she left like for a month. She like, hey, how did you, which at that point, did that leave you alone in the house when she was gone for that month?
Yeah.
And
yeah, it was just me and the dog.
That's it. And what happened in that month, considering that now you couldn't say, well, it was my wife that did that, or that you, I don't know, maybe you had to come home to be by yourself in that house? That must have been
well,
bad.
It's something that I tell investigators, because they dress in black and they get night vision glasses and all that crap. The reality is ghosts don't have time. And if it's a human spirit, it's going to do activities that it did in its life.
Yes, it does.
Now, typically in its life, it's going to be sleeping at certain hours.
Exactly.
And that's pretty much, when I look back, is what it was. All of our activity was between 6 and 7 in the morning and 10 o'clock at night.
Right. Like that cycle.
So, now it was rare for us to have any activity after 10 o'clock. And we never had any in the middle of the night. So all the activity and everything happened in the daytime. Well, when my wife left, I'm gone in the daytime, and I was working 2 jobs. So I didn't get home till 10 o'clock at night.
Okay.
I don't walk the dog and have myself a sandwich or something and hit the sack, and I'd be up again at 5:30 in the morning. I really didn't have much trouble. I had did to me that sort of frightened me was it turned down a gas burner.
What happened?
And I came home in the evening and I was going to make myself, I don't know, Chef Boyardee ravioli or something. And I poured it in the pot, and my dog started going to the door and whining, so I knew I had to take her out. So before I could prepare anything, I took the dog and we went out. And she did her business. We came back in the house, and the food that I had in my pot was all burnt, and the gas was on, which I didn't turn it on, of course. It was just it was an occurrence that sort of scared me, because it had never truly played with the utilities before. Yeah. Other than electrical static or, blinking the lights on and off.
Yes.
So it did make me a little bit of what it could do, what it was capable of.
Yeah, that, and I can imagine. Well, in a way, it sounds lucky, because it sounds like what you were saying, that they were following the pattern of a normal household. Early morning, and later in the evening, which is exactly, when most households see the most activity. And that makes sense as far as, because I've heard of that before. And people and you were absolutely right. I'm so glad that you brought that up, Ed, as far as that everybody thinks that all these frightening things only happen at night, at midnight, at 3 a.m., whatever the case might be. And sometimes it's far from that. It's usually early morning, depending on where you're at, maybe dusk when the sun's coming down, because in some cases, depending on where you were, this was like the end of the day for you, or later at night, maybe when people were sitting down to dinner, etc., whatever time period we're talking about.
I mean, the only advantage to the investigators going out at night is that it's peaceful and quiet.
No, Sure.
so that they can be more aware of anything around them if something does happen. And they can also sneak into some of these buildings they're not allowed in.
Yes.
So, I hear about them sneaking into old closed buildings, institutions, and things.
Yeah.
Which they couldn't do in the daytime, of course.
Of course not.
So, that's some of their advantages. But as far as overall activity, it had to be in the daytime to be. I would think that if they visited some of these haunted hospitals and things, it would all be daytime activity.
Yes.
Very little at night.
Ed, let me ask you something. And looking back now, because like you said, your knowledge, your perspective has changed from when you were there as a young man to now, like you said, based on your experiences, people you've known, psychics. Looking back now, did you ever have any type of experience prior to living there that would fall into that category and you just failed to recognize it for what it was?
No, I had no experience whatsoever. And in fact, I had a second thing happen to me that I just wound up being interviewed by a guy who's writing a book. But I died when I was 19. I got electrocuted.
What?
And so I had an NDE when I was 19. I had a near-death experience. And it was wonderful. I mean, it was painful to come back. Yes,
that's what I've heard.
But I didn't think, because that was not a subject in 1965.
No, you were just lucky that I'm alive. Thanks, I think.
Well, honestly, at that point, I've died a couple times in my life. I've got a real weak heart. But at 19, when I was a strong young man, the death was euphoric.
Okay.
And you're going. I felt I was going to a wonderful place, and all my pain was gone. All my concerns were gone. So, how they even revived me?
Yeah, back then.
It was some guy. I woke up to him sitting on my chest, pumping in. I guess he was lifeguard trained, because there was no such thing as ERTs, EMTs, or anything like that.
Right. No, the CPR stuff and all that.
Portable defibrillators. Yeah. So all I knew is I was in this wonderful place, and all of a sudden, boom, I was back, and I was in pain, severe pain. And that turned out to be an experience, but it wasn't one, I didn't consider it paranormal. I didn't consider it anything other than, hey, I'm back, I'm lucky to be here. The only effect it had on me, actually, was that from that point on in my life, I was never afraid of death.
But you kept that to yourself.
I'm not afraid of death today. I'm sorry?
You kept that to yourself. As far as that reflection, that interior knowledge, that was okay. I'm not going to go around talking to people and saying, well, I'm not afraid to die anymore, because like you said, back then when you started talking about things like that, people would look at you like going, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, no, I mean, my behavior changed a little bit because
really?
I just wasn't afraid anymore of anything. Because dying is not a problem, okay? Breaking your leg is a problem, because that hurts like hell.
Yeah.
You're
right.
But at least I know, and I've talked to a lot of people who've had the experience, NDEs, and I've only met one lady who had a terrible experience.
Okay.
Everybody else had an experience that closely resembled what I felt.
Yeah, I was going to say that's. I mean, I've read the books, about NDEs, and I like you said, you do have some outliers where people have these very bad, dark experiences, but overall, it's a positive experience. Exactly like what you said. I don't want to go back. And then when they wake up back in their bodies, when they feel the pain, etc. But you said you've died more than once?
Yeah, later in my life, I had a what they call a severe cardiac infarction, and my heart stopped. And but the difference became my mindset, because I knew it was coming. I was in an emergency room where they had no cardiologist, and the guy was hardly trained.
Okay.
They had no equipment. And basically, they told me when I got there, but they took the readings, and the nurses and that, they basically said, you're going to die.
Wow.
And yeah, and they said there was a drug called TPA that I could try, which I did do, and it wound up actually eventually saving my life. But they said I was going to die, and I had my wife there, one of my daughters, my brother made it there, and I had to say goodbye to all these people.
That's a difficult thing.
I found that to be sad. I wasn't, even though I knew that I was in for a pleasurable experience, I wasn't afraid of dying. I just didn't want to leave life because I'm enjoying myself.
Mm-hmm.
It's much like today. I enjoy every day. It's a God-given day, and I'm going to make the best of it every single day.
And I understand perfectly what you were saying. It was the people that you didn't want to leave behind. It wasn't the actual life part. I mean, yeah.
Exactly. And I think the older I get, the more I feel that way because, now I got 4 granddaughters, and they're all they're getting older and very interesting. And no, they are. They're interesting. The generation gap is incredible, and what they believe from the media and what is true is like unbelievable because they believe all this stuff that they get on social media.
Well, they get bombarded. That's the thing.
So I sit there with them and I interrogate them, and we all have a bunch of laughs because they look at me like a dinosaur. At my last house, we lived on a golf course.
Okay.
And the golf carts would come by our house, and I was sitting out there with my granddaughters, and I said, "Yeah, in my day they didn't have golf carts." They all looked at me like I was nuts, and they said, "Do you have to carry your clubs?" And I said, "No." They had boys that were called caddies.
Uh-huh.
And you'd pay them a few dollars, and they'd carry the clubs for you. And my one granddaughter said, "That's a bunch of bunk." And then she called for my wife, said, "Is this true?"
Isn't it incredible that
Yes.
that
the differences in our age. I mean, I've got a book out there called A Trip Back in Time.
Okay.
It's not my bestseller. It's a kind book, but it's about a father. It's about a grandfather who can take his kids back to the time when he was 10 years old.
Wow.
So he takes his children back to 1956, actually.
That's a very interesting premise, Ed.
And I power packed the book with a lot of pop culture.
Okay.
Things that were there in those years that aren't here anymore.
So,
but it's a book I had fun writing.
Well, you know what it is also? It's like you made a good point. Between the 1950s and the next 50 or 60 years, technology has advanced so rapidly that I'm sure, even though you say you don't have cable, now everybody has a phone. Whereas before, you were lucky if you had one phone in the house, all right, and that was it. No answering machines, nothing of the kind. It was like, that was it. And
and they were ungodly expensive. You couldn't own a phone. In 1970, you could not own a phone. You got to lease it from the phone company. And
you leased them.
It cost like about $85 to put a jack in the house.
I remember that.
So that, to get your phone moved was like a big thing. It was going to be real expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And, there were no iPhones. And I did have a fellow that wrote me once. It was funny. I knew he had to be a youth because he read the book and he said, where I talked about the apparition, he said, "Why didn't you snap a picture with your iPhone?"
It's like, yeah, okay. Right.
Yeah, no, there weren't any iPhones. There weren't any VCRs. I'm lucky to have that YouTube video, actually.
Mm-hmm.
That some guy made that. He jerry-rigged it from a surveillance camera onto a TV. So it was MacGyvered in there. I don't know what the hell he did, but he was able to get the videos. It's not very good, but it is at least a record.
Hello? Hello? You know what? I don't want to think, because I had trouble calling it with my computer. I know people are going to say I'm weird, but I don't want to think that it's another situation of paranormal sabotage. I'm telling you. This just doesn't. I'm telling you. There's something here. Let me see if I can get a hold of him. But, let's see. Let's see if I have a feeling somebody's calling him. The number is, I'm not kidding you guys. Right now I'm getting a message on my Google Hangout. It says call failed to connect or disconnected because the number was unreachable. Oh, wow. Okay, that is something else. I'm telling you. That is really weird. Here we go again. Cross your fingers, guys. Here we go.
I guess we got disconnected.
Yes. It was like, I know you couldn't hear me. I could hear you, but you couldn't. I could tell. It's like something happened, and don't worry. It's like, okay. If we're talking about technology, yeah, it's anything but perfect.
Well, we're sure dependent on it today, though.
Oh, we are at its mercy. We are at its mercy. Okay. Believe me, like I said, I was here when Hurricane Irma came through Florida, and I spent a week without electricity. And talk about making that very evident. Besides, having to sleep without, which is what I was when you were talking that thing about technology. I was born and raised here in Miami, and I remember when I was growing up, when I was a kid, you didn't have central AC. We would have room units, and you turned them on at night, and I was fine. You had fans on, and you were fine. Now, and myself included, if I have to be around without an AC, especially in the summer, it's like, oh my God, I can't take this. And when back then, it wasn't a problem. It's just the way things were. So,
the only thing that bugs me about today is everyone's social media addiction. And I can't tell you how many car accidents I've almost got in because people were texting on their phones.
Yes.
And when my grandkids come over and we have a get-together, I force them, they cannot bring their phones to the dinner table.
Yes, I agree with you.
And I have a hammer. It's actually like it's an old cobbler's hammer. It looks like the one Geppetto would use in Pinocchio, but I call it the eye hammer. And I tell them, and they know that I'll do it. Anybody brings their phone to the table,
nobody's going to call your bluff? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they're not going to call my bluff. They know better. Because I would demo it. But I can't stand it. I don't know how kids function. I don't know how that's going to affect future generations.
Well, and you know what, Ed? And I think the only people that appreciate it are people like us that were around before they had answering machines and everything that came afterwards. Is like, I think it stresses you out because the thing is that nowadays you're expected to be available 24/7. Hey, if the phone rings, why didn't you answer it? Hey, I sent you an email, or I left you a voicemail. And back then it was like, if somebody called you on the phone and nobody answered, well, either you called later or they sent you a letter or whatever. But it wasn't that instant gratification where, hey, why can't I talk to you in 5 seconds? And I think that stresses people out when you have to be available for who's trying to get a hold of you, or in this case, voluntarily, because you're always on all these different social media outlets.
Well, it's one of the things that I feel sorry for the younger generation, because at least in my day, if I finished my work day, when I walked out the door, I walked out the door.
That was it. That was the end of that. Yes, you're absolutely right.
And I had peace and quiet. And yes, they could call me at home. But they couldn't call me in the car, and I didn't have to answer text messages. And much of what I see as far as texting, it don't make any damn sense. I mean, people are texting. I'm at the grocery store right now. Who gives a crap? We're sitting down to dinner. Who gives a crap?
Look at this really, fresh fruit they have in the supermarket.
Yeah, I mean, they text stuff that you don't really care, and
but
I can see why people are having difficulty, being social and communicating on a personal level, because the other thing is that it's going to demolish people's education as far as spelling.
Oh, let's not go there. Oh my God, it's atrocious.
Now. I mean, for people, for someone to write a letter and use a U instead of Y-O-U.
Yeah.
Or an R instead of A-R-E.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that's going to do to the English language over time.
No. Or an emoji, put a smiley face to say you're happy or whatever. It's like.
Yeah. I'm an old dog, I guess, but I don't like any of it. It's even on Facebook. If someone messages me, I get quite a few.
Mm-hmm.
I'll copy their message off to Word processor. Then I'll write out my answer back in a letter form, and then I'll send them the document. And if they can't read the document, then I'll copy and paste it. But I don't like a long strand like that. To me, it's illegible. It's like there's no personality or emotion to it. I don't like writing that way.
Well, you know what? The thing, Ed, is that the people that get engaged, and everybody, but like you said, the younger generations are the ones that do it, that are on there, like basically letting everybody know what they're doing, when they're doing it, where, how, whatever. And that's great until it flips on its side.
I lost you
and then
again.
You get where...
If you can hear me, I don't know what's happening.
Okay, you cannot hear me.
You're getting cut off.
All right. You know what? I'm going to send you an email if you can hear me.
Okay, I'm going to hang up so you can call me back.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Thank you, Ed. Bye. Okay. I'm telling you guys, something is up. Something is up with this. Hold on, let me send him a link to the show. Okay, here we go. Off we go. I'm going to tell you something right now. I know, without trying to read, because God knows, I know that computers and all the stuff that we got attached to it, I know it can go sideways. I worked enough around it to know that that is an absolute possibility. However, okay, I know for a fact that sometimes, you could say, well, that's the case. But from the moment that you're trying to contact somebody, okay, and that's what happened with him. My computer it was working fine. I was getting ready, and I come back, and my computer, I had to restart it. That's why I was late. I was frantically trying to what is going on here? Okay, and then, I got him on the line, and everything is fine, and then I start having these problems where he can't hear me, and then I couldn't hear him. And I'm telling you, we could write it off to computer glitches or whatever, bad internet connection, which, by the way, where I'm at, it sounds, the quality of his voice, the way it was coming over was great. It was fantastic. So I don't think it was that. Makes me wonder that, obviously he left that house many years ago. And like he said, he still's got travelers that come through. It makes me wonder what some of them are just doing their own version of a little paranormal sabotage. I don't think that's beyond the realm of possibility, because as you can tell now, everything is working fine. And food for thought, food for thought. Anyway, guys, I wish this could have been a longer interview with Ed. His work is fascinating, and in the credits of the show, I want to put links to where you could purchase his books. I wasn't kidding. Despite what everybody says, there's nothing more terrifying than the truth when it comes to something like this. Okay? And speaking with him, or listening to him, in other words, you could tell he's a very no-nonsense kind of person. If anything, I bet that he probably understated some of the things that were in the book. As in, if he, it probably could have been scarier, which, like I said, it's almost like when people understate that, is when you realize, wow, there is something more to it. It's scary. It's the possibilities of things that can happen to you, because now, and this is the thing, like he said, that thing about that well-worn Ouija board, wow. But in other words, I guess what the scariest point of this is, this didn't happen to them because they were playing with a Ouija board, because they were doing rituals. They were just a young couple who moved into an old house thinking, this is where I can put my family in. I'll have a baby. And that's it. That's where you're at. You're just trying to live life. And then this happens. And I think, at least to me, this is what's scary, because you are living your life. You're not looking for it. You think of yourself as being normal. And then this basically intrudes into your life, and it starts eating away at your relationships, because you could tell there was parts of there where maybe he wasn't believing his wife, or he was blaming her for stuff. Here she's at home alone with a baby. And I'm sure that when he's talking about being anxious and looking over your shoulder, that's a horrible feeling, folks. That is a horrible feeling for one day. Can you imagine what it's like to live, or like what he said, when you have no idea what it is that you're up against? And unfortunately, your imagination, even the person with the least imagination, it's that unknowable. Is it one thing? Is it several things? Is it a person? What is it? Okay. And that thing about how he acted in anger, I think that's typical, especially of men, because at that time, you want to fight, you want to confront whoever, whatever it is, and you end up talking to thin air, at least. And of course, he has the wisdom of many years, and that have gone by, and being out of that, because when you're in that emotional state, your reaction is different than when you're out of it and you're looking at it from what I call the observer point of view. And he made a very good point. For all these people that want to get into paranormal investigations and studies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Let me tell you, there are different qualities of hauntings or supernatural. There's what you call your classic, your residual, which is nothing there. Then you get your regular dead person who might be confused as to, what happened to them, or they want to stay in their home. It could be a whole host of issues, but there's no malevolence. And then there's other things that become much, much darker. And just to give you a quick segue, I was recently trying to reach out to a very famous exorcist. His name is Archbishop Fail, and he is very well known. He's an archbishop with the Old Catholic Church. And they have an order of exorcists, and I was reaching out to him because I was thinking I would love to interview him, and he's been doing it for so many years, and just talk about his cases, talk about how these reality paranormal shows what they've done to the consciousness of people out there when it comes to paranormal, supernatural, ghosts, etc. And he answered me back that one of the cases that he was involved with, which I don't know which one or how, he basically had a very severe health crisis that occurred, that initiated when he was in the middle of an exorcism. Okay? And his life was in jeopardy, and he had to go on what he described was a very excessive regimen of medications to basically keep him alive. And unfortunately, the side effects of a lot of these drugs also, there was a downside to them, and even his hearing was affected. It was a whole host of things. And, he said, basically that it would have to be something where he could communicate better because his hearing had been affected very severely, almost that he can't hear. So we postponed that. I'm hoping that he's going to recontact me and that we could set that up. But my point is that, yes, there are paranormal or supernatural situations, which is not your typical person that's passed away and, it's a dead person. And, yeah, you treat them with love. There's darker things out there. And I'm going to bring this up because I want to bring it up because you see a lot of psychics and a lot of mediums, okay, that they say, oh, I never have anything negative contact me. And I'm going to tell you something. In my experience, yes, if you, for example, psychic mediums or somebody that you're contacting that says, I want to contact my dearly departed whoever, and most of them will make that distinction and say, look, I can't guarantee you that that person that you're wanting to speak to is the person that's going to come through. Okay? And sometimes it works. But then these are the ones that say, no. And I'm thinking to myself, wait. As a matter of fact, it's your entities, it's your spirits that haven't crossed overs, which, like he said, are the ones that are desperate to make communication. Okay? And you better believe that a good portion of these entities, whether it's because they were bad people when they were alive, maybe because they have been out of the presence of the divine for so long, depending on how long they've been in there, in this in-between place, they can be really unpleasant. Those far outnumber, okay, a deceased person that's gone into the light that may want to communicate with them. So when these psychics say, I never have contacts with the negative side, it's like, are you kidding me? That's the good majority of the scarnets. Okay? That's what's out there. Because let me tell you something, for a human soul, there is nothing worse than being out of the presence of the divine. In that in-between place, you're not human. You don't have a human body anymore, so this plane is not for you. So you're that in between, what they call a stuck place for whatever reason, whatever it is. It could be a gazillion reasons for it. And when you ascend and you go into the presence of the divine, which is, when that ego part of you kind of drops away. That is a horrible place for a human soul to be in. Okay? And those are the ones that when you have a psychic open up or try to make communications, they are the ones that rush you. They rush you. Okay? And a lot of the things that they give off, whether it's because they died violently, they died violently or tragic, or they were violent individuals or whatever. Let me tell you something. It's like, okay, if you're a psychic or a medium and you say that the dark side, it's like, okay, you're insulated. Because that's who's out there. The majority of them. That's who's out there. The ones that are desperate. Help me cross over. Help me. I'm desperate. I don't know what happened to me. Nobody can talk to me. Nobody can see me. Or if you're a violent, angry person, maybe you're just pissed because you shouldn't have died or got killed. All these emotions. Because remember, we are the center of our universe. I'm the center of my universe, and that's the human perspective. And even when you're dead, you're carrying on with whatever was going on in your world. And if you're caught in that in-between place, whether it's because you're seeking help or explanation or reassurance and they and you either you got that little light going on, or you're actually going out there and you're trying to communicate, that's who's coming in. So yeah, let me get off my soapbox now. What I'm trying to say is that if you truly are going to go into the paranormal field, don't do it on a lark. Don't do it for a thrill, because he's absolutely right. What you might get is not what you expect. And when you're ready to say, I don't want to do this anymore, it could say, but I'm not through with you. And that's a story for another day. But anyway, guys, I hope you liked this video. Please subscribe to my channel. Hit the like button. Okay, catch me on Twitter and on Facebook. I do a lot of live streaming there. I don't do more live streaming here on YouTube because sometimes in the places that I go to, the signal, the Wi-Fi or internet signal is like non-existent, and basically it would be all you would get is a really bad quality video of lagging. I've already tried that a couple of times. So guys, please check back. And again, thank you so very, very much for viewing. Take care.